Welcome to the Heart and Life Podcast, a podcast dedicated to encouraging, equipping, and edifying the people called Methodist in North Alabama and across the globe. Welcome once again to the Heart and Life Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Rogers. On today's episode, we'll be talking with the Reverend Nannette Brooks. Nannette is a deacon in the North Alabama Conference of the Global Methodist Church and is currently serving as the pastor at Sweet Home Methodist and Standing Rock Methodist down in our South District. In addition, Nannette is also serving as the conference coordinator for women's ministry in the Global Methodist Church. I invited Nannette on the podcast today to talk about several topics. In our conversation, we'll touch on what it's like serving multiple congregations. We'll talk about women's ministry in the Global Methodist Church, and we'll talk some as well about what it's like being a female clergy person in our conference. I'm excited to have this conversation, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Nannette, I'm grateful to have you on today. Welcome to the Heart and Life Podcast.
Brandon, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm excited about our conversation that we're going to have and just the things that God is doing within the churches in our Global Methodist congregation. It's pretty exciting.
It really is, and I agree with that. The word excitement comes up a lot in conversations that I have with folks, and that's a great thing. We should be excited about what God is doing. We should be, I tell people all the time, we really ought to be the most joyful people on the face of the earth because of who we are and whose we are. And so it is great to feel that excitement and looking forward to hearing your story and looking forward to hearing about the great ministries you're involved with. So I'd like to start our conversation today and give you the chance to talk a little bit about yourself, kind of your background, your call to ministry, where you're currently serving, all that great stuff. So kind of tell us all about Nannette Brooks.
Do you have all day? Well, I'm Nannette Brooks. I met the love of my life when I was 14 years old. I know that sounds pretty young to some that are going to be listening, but there were some life things that happened that brought me back to Valley, Alabama. I had been back in the community in about a week, for about a week, and just happened to meet this fantastic guy. His name is Devon Brooks. My grandmother always said that he was the angel that God sent to rescue me, and he has rescued me many times, let me say that. But yeah, I was 14, we got married when I was 18 years old. Turned 18 the end of May, graduated high school, and became a wife in June. So we will be celebrating 49 years of marriage come this June. So
oh, wow. Congratulations.
Well. Yeah,
it has.
Well. He's my absolute best friend. We are blessed to be the parents of two sons. Marty Brooks he's going to strangle me, but he's 45 years old. He is a professional musician, currently living in the Kansas City, Missouri area. Our youngest son, Daniel, is 39 years old, and Daniel serves as the network engineer for our county school system here in Chambers County, and in May will have his master's degree in educational analytics and psychology. And on the side, he is a semi-professional musician, so life's kind of interesting for the Brooks family. And then there's this little girl that she was black-headed. She currently has purple hair, but she's our 22-year-old granddaughter, Marley. So That's who we are as a family.
Awesome.
As far as, ministry and how did I get to these two little small white churches built in the 1830s, I will be very, very honest. There was never anything on my to-do list that says when I grow up I want to be a preacher. It was not there. Was not something I had planned. But 2017, I received a call from our district superintendent with the United Methodist Church at that time. It was Lewis Archer. And I really thought that he was calling me to tell me that he was going to be moving our pastor because I was chairperson of our SPRC committee, and I was loaded for bear. And he says the words, I think you have a call on your life. And I took the phone and I held it out literally away from my ear. I looked at it and I put it back up. I said, Lewis, do you know who you just called? And he said, yeah. He said, Nannette. And I said, okay, what are you saying? And he said, well, just, from some observance, and had done the lay speaker class, that he really felt like that God was calling me to pulpit ministry. Again, I asked him, I said, are you sure you called the right person? So that led to some conversations, and, I told him, I said, you know that I'm different. And he said, exactly. And so I told him to give me 2 weeks to let me think about it. Before he ended the conversation, he says, there's something I need to tell you. And I said, yes, sir. He said, I've already talked to the church about the fact that I'm talking to a female about possibly appointing them as their minister, and they're okay with it. Deep breath.
Yeah.
Really, really deep breath, because in all honesty, that took me back to when my home church, Hopewell Methodist, that's in the Valley area, we were appointed a female minister, and there were people that left our church that never, ever gave her a chance. Didn't even listen to her first sermon. She was amazing. She was so amazing. She lived up near Lake Wedowee. She and her husband both were in the ministry. And the coolest thing was she would ride her white gold wing Honda to church some Sunday. So she was really cool. But, she was very gifted in the ministry. But, at that moment when Lewis said that, it's like, okay, we're this far advanced, but nothing's really changed. So I told him, I said, you got to give me 2 weeks. I've got to pray. I got to talk to my husband. I got to talk to my sons, because the call and the acceptance of going into ministry is just not for the person that's going to be standing in the pulpit. It's for your whole family.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So he called me a week later, and I'll never forget, because this was one of those God moments. I happened to be in Walmart in Opelika, Alabama, picking up some supplies for work when Lewis called me and wanted to know if I made a decision yet. And I told him, no. I said, I hadn't. I said, we're going on a trip this weekend. Yvonne and I are going to talk about it while we're in the mountains, and I'll let you know something Monday. And then he says, well, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you what church it is. And I said, okay. He says, it's Standing Rock Methodist. And I just kind of stood there for a moment, because my eyes began to tear up. I'll try to hold it together.
Yeah, you're doing great.
Devon's hasn't had an uncle that was not able to travel to the valley to church anymore, that lived literally about a mile from Standing Rock. Uncle Dickie was the first person I thought about. And then I thought about another product of Hopewell Methodist that accepted a call in the ministry, was a gentleman named Milton Newton. And that was Milton's first appointment. Well, I told him, I said, well, that's great. I said, but I still, just give me to the weekend. So I am headed to the checkout, and I run into one of my, what I consider spiritual mothers from Hopewell, that just happened to be in Walmart. And I told her what was going on, and she says, you got to wait. Rusty's here. You got to tell him. Well, her husband is Rusty Williams, who was my Sunday school teacher at one point, until he accepted the call into ministry from Hopewell Methodist Church. He, was just so excited. And it was kind of like at that point that I knew, Brandon, that what God was telling me to do. So when I got outside, I called my husband. The first words out of his mouth were, wow, that would be great, because then Uncle Dickie and Clinton, and he started naming off his cousins that live in the area, maybe they could come to church.
Oh, wow. That's so awesome. Usually when people talk about having a religious experience at Walmart, it's not that good.
No, it's not. But it was like really, really like wow. So my second phone call was to Milton. And by the time I got off the phone with him, I knew every person at Standing Rock Methodist Church. I knew about them. It was like people I had known forever.
Wow.
So I did end up with, this was on Monday, I believe, and on Thursday we were riding to the mountains, and Devon says, this was the funniest conversation, we're between LaGrange and Carrollton, and there's this part of the road where it's beautiful view of the mountains. And Devon says, have you called that man yet? I said, what man? He said, the man you got to call about taking to the church at Standing Rock. I said, no, I told him I'd call him after this weekend. He said, why are you making him wait? He said, you haven't shut up talking about this since he called you that day at work. So we called him from the truck on the way to Tennessee to tell him that I would accept that call.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. And kind of fast forward with that appointment, Brandon, several of his family members ended up coming. And in 2018, I did his first cousin's funeral service on Saturday, his Uncle Dickie's on Sunday, and by August, the end of August, 1st of September, his cousin Clinton's.
Oh, wow.
So 3 of his family members that had not been able to attend a church had come. Uncle Dickie was there. We only had services at Standing Rock, the second and fourth Sunday. His granddaughter would bring him every time we had service. His Clinton, which was Devon's cousin, who had not been in church in years, was coming, on a regular basis, and even Karen. So, if that was the only reason I was to go to Standing Rock, to God be the glory.
Worthwhile, wouldn't it? Oh,
yeah,
wow.
to God be the glory. So,
amen. That's so awesome.
So yes, so I did that, and then in 21. And this is going to be raw, okay?
All right.
Because I think raw and honesty is very important.
Sure.
I had been having some meetings with my mentor and some discussions with my DS at the time, and still in the United Methodist, both who I highly respected. Think a world of both of them. That there was discussion about an appointment change. And I was led by the discussions to assume, which be careful when you assume anything, that I was going to be moved to a larger church. Possibly 2 larger churches on a dual point charge. All indications that was what was going to happen. So I was sitting in Uncle Ernie's in Panama City with 3 of my friends. We do a girls trip every year, and my DS called, and I stepped away to talk to him, and he told me that I was going to be staying at Standing Rock, but that I was going to be appointed to a second little small church called Sweet Home. Wasn't what I expected. So I stepped into the ladies' room. I had to get myself together because I was disappointed. Real disappointed. Well, I go back to the table, and they can tell that I've been crying, and I told them I was about to tell them what was happening. My phone rang, and it was my mentor. And stepped away from the table again, and he wanted to know how I got a call, and I told him yes. And he said, well, how do you feel about it? And I said, not good. I said, I'm really disappointed. And then he said, what did he tell you? And when I told him, he said, I don't know what happened, that it's not what we discussed just before that call was made. So now, here I am, kind of caught in the middle. I feel like a rubber band that's just been stretched and it's about to break at any time. So at this point, I'm a little more emotional, and I have to call my rock. So I call Devon and I tell him what's going on. And he said, you need to get yourself together. He said, somebody at that church needs you. And it's like, okay. Well, I, of course, accepted it. I loved it. I was only there a few months, and they know this story. They know that I was disappointed. But I told them, I said, and Devon told me that there was somebody here that needed me. And I said, no. I said, that was not why I'm at Sweet Home. I said, because I needed you. Because I served two very small churches. And when I say small churches, I'm talking about anywhere from 2 to 12 people in attendance on a Sunday.
Okay.
But they're like two children, and they're two totally different personalities. And Standing Rock fits one set of my needs, where Sweet Home fits another set. And I told him, I said, I needed y'all, so that's how I ended up with two little churches. Sweet Home is where I describe it as a church where the pavement meets the dirt road, the little white church tucked off in the trees. So, in Standing Rock, we laugh because it is a sanctuary. You walk in the front door, you're in the sanctuary. That is all there is. There is no bathroom. There's a sanctuary.
Oh, wow.
So we have jokes about that too. So
yeah, sure. Well, that is what a powerful move of God. And how often are our expectations so different, and then God moves and it's exactly what we need. That's a sermon right there for sure. Well, you have kind of touched on where I wanted to lead this conversation, and that is really talking about the vital importance of small churches. Sometimes we get caught up in the big churches, and we see so much about mega churches, and it's all about, it seems to be all about bigger and bigger and bigger. But there is a vital role for smaller churches in our conference, and really for the whole of Christianity. There is such an importance. And I know I was had Alan Beasley, our conference superintendent, on the podcast a few weeks back, and he was talking about just how much vital ministry is being done in smaller congregations. So you really have kind of touched on that a good bit, but just talk a little bit, if you would, about how significant it really is for folks to be able to connect in some of these smaller churches.
Well, yeah, I personally feel like that this is the call of my life, that my call is to serve the small churches, not a bigger church, to serve these little ones, because they are vested in their churches. They're very vested. Most of them live what we would say in the South, spitting distance from the church. They've grown up in there. Their parents, their grandparents, have been part of the church, and they meet a need. A lot of times, one of my churches, the congregation is significantly older. The other one has somewhat of a mix. I don't have young children in either one of them, but one time I kept thinking, I need to do something to get kids in Standing Rock, and it's like God just had knocked me upside the head and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. This is who they are, and it's great when kids come in, but in the reality, we don't have the resources to serve them. So, but we can minister, but not, we don't even have a place to have a Sunday school class. But anyway, it's a unique kind of ministry for me. There's things that I can do in my small churches that people with a larger church wouldn't be able to do. And I'm going to use this as a for instance. We just completed, we've completed at Standing Rock, at Sweet Home, and we're finishing up at Standing Rock. Max Lucado, who's one of my favorite authors, wrote a book called What Happens Next. It's about the end times.
Okay.
So because of the makeup of my congregations and not being able to have Bible studies outside of, special times, we have journeyed with Max Lucado through that book. And I laughed because I told them we're going to have a guest speaker, and our guest speaker is going to be Max Lucado. And for the next 6 weeks, 6 services, Max is going to bring our message. And that's what we did, and I would add commentary and stuff to it. And, he teaches about the end times in a much more profound way than Nannette Brooks is capable of right now. So you couldn't do that as a worship service. Necessarily in a bigger church. It's a lot of times there's more intimacy. It's not that they speak out, a lot, but just connections with body language, as I'm, in the pulpit and how I see things. And, sometimes I can kind of shift if I see that, there's not quite connecting what I'm saying by the body language, and I can shift that because I can make individual eye contact with each and every one of them. And one of the things that I try to help them to understand is that I don't care if you're 5 years old or 105 years old. You still have gifts and talents and graces that you can go out and share with others and do all you can to make heaven crowded. Whether it's sending cards, taking somebody some soup, baking cookies, anything that you do in love. So, so many times what happens, Brandon, is those little churches are overlooked.
Yeah.
And they begin to feel like they have no purpose anymore. And it's very important for them to realize they do, because I'll use Standing Rock. The congregation at Standing Rock is older. I'm the youth group. I'm 66 years old. And they laugh about that. But they're very involved in community activities. There's fundraisers that go on for our community center that's being rebuilt. That the first one was actually pretty much head speared and built by those that were part of the Standing Rock congregation at that time. They pick up trash on the side of the road. They were going to pick up trash one Saturday. I did not want to go. The weather was not like I wanted. I just really didn't want to go, but I did. Well, I felt really bad because I got up there and I got, not the best attitude in the world about picking up trash up and down the main road, and walking for miles. And one of the women that showed up, when I got there, I said, "Miss Bonnie, what are you doing here?" She said, "Well, I feel better." Well, Miss Bonnie had just been in the emergency room the day before because she was having problems with her heart. But Miss Bonnie was there to pick up trash.
Oh, wow.
So,
wow.
Yeah. So, there's just some uniqueness that's there. And in our area, we have a lot of those what are called tiny churches. And, at Hopewell one time, when churches were being closed because of their size, we were on the cutting block and fought really, really, really hard to not be closed. And now it's, that small church is, like I was sharing with you off the air, they're experiencing some phenomenal growth, not only in numbers, but in their faith journey and their spirituality that is being led by the laity. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. And I think, sometimes, well, I'll just say it this way. It's easy to get caught up in numbers. And ministry is not how many people you fit into your church. It's how many lives are transformed. And that's not all, it's easy to measure. It's easy to measure attendance. It's not as easy to measure spiritual growth. But that's so much more important than the numbers.
Exactly.
So that's awesome. Well, so you are currently serving 2 churches now. For the folks who came from our former denomination or are familiar with the Methodist Church, that's not that uncommon a thing. I've done it myself, but it does present, and I want to have your thoughts on this. It presents some unique challenges, but also I think some unique joys to be able to serve multiple congregations at the same time. So I just kind of want to get your thoughts on what it's like to sort of have to juggle 2 different congregations, and like you said, my experience too is very different personalities.
Mm-hmm.
Every church is different. It's not like they're cookie cutters. So you have to approach things differently in each place, and you're doing that all at the same time. So what has that been like for you to serve multiple congregations?
At first, it's trying to figure out how in the world am I going to do this, because one of the challenges, like I said, is that Standing Rock only has services second and fourth Sunday, where Sweet Home we have services every week. So if I'm wanting to do a sermon series, how do I make that continuity happen in a church that's only meeting twice a month? That can be kind of a little juggling act. Some sermon series that I have done, it's easy because it's like, it may be, for instance, I did a series on the hard sayings of Jesus. Well, those were standalones. One didn't lead into the next week's message. That's easy. When I'm trying to do something that leads on, it's not that I can, on that second, fourth Sunday, that whatever I just preached at Sweet Home, that now I'm going to go preach the same thing at Standing Rock. So I've got to adjust that. I've got to possibly take in 2 weeks worth of teachings and combine that into one. And the other part is that, and this by serving multiple churches at the same time, the Holy Spirit is just amazing and how He works and how He speaks through us, because although the text is the same, it is rare that the messages are.
Oh, absolutely. 100% agree
rare,
with that.
Very rare. So He does His job. If I'll get out of the way, that's the big thing. And it's got to hush and get out of the way and be that vessel which He can work through. He can take that text and present it in such a way through me that both churches are getting what they need from their level of understanding.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No,
Now,
I do agree with that. Now, when I was serving two churches, they both met every Sunday, and that, in some ways, that actually made it easier, because, like you were talking about, having to kind of adjust things for a church that only meets the second and fourth Sunday. I could essentially plan out each week, like using the same text for each place. Like you said, now the messages always end up being different, but at least there was some commonality there in the preparation. But having to juggle that with a church that doesn't meet every single Sunday, that had to present some unique challenges for you.
Yeah, it does. And when I first started, I was at just Standing Rock, and I had the best of both worlds, because I was able to bring a message every other week, and the other weeks I was able to go to my home church and have that being fed experience, so to say. And there's times I miss that, so I have to look for other ways to make sure that Nannette's getting the nourishment that Nannette needs to get in order for me to be what my churches need. In 20...
Can I stop you right there for a second? Because I think that is such a great point that sometimes we as pastors, and those who are listening who are pastors can attest to this, it's hard for us to be able to go and just worship and not have to lead, and that is an important thing that sometimes we neglect, I think, as pastors.
Yeah, it is. And in my scenario, I don't sing. I'm not good at it. I held on to the genes just long enough for me to pass those on to our children. But I'm the song director. I'm the worship leader. I'm the pastor. I'm preparing the bulletins. You just kind of do it all. And that sometimes can present some challenges, because but something as simple as choosing music, I think that's the hardest thing that I do every week, is choose the music, because number one is that we use the old green celebration hymnal, and I don't always use that, but we do that at Sweet Home. We have a pianist at Standing Rock, but they use nothing but the brown Cokesbury, and they know about 10 songs out of it. So, so you gotta balance, those things out. One of the biggest challenges that I had physically came in 20. Something started happening in 20 during the time of COVID that I started losing my voice every single day at work. At that time, I was a chief clerk for the probate judge in Chambers County and did a lot of talking at work. But by the end of the day, I had no voice. Throat hurt, and battled it pretty bad. Still not real sure what causes it. It gets better and then it comes back. And there's still times now that those weeks that I have 2 churches, by the time I get home, there is no voice. It's gone. It will be strong as long as I need it, but on the way home, it's like, okay, you're done.
Just not talking the rest of the day.
Don't say anything else. So, it's usually kind of quiet at the house because my husband usually hangs out at his hunting club on Sunday afternoons for some quiet time, I guess, away from me since we're both retired. And I'm exhausted. I mean, that's just, and I hear that from a lot of pastors, especially, I feel for the pastors that have one church but have 2 or 3 services. At least I get, if I'm driving, and it's taking me, it should be taking me 20 to 30 minutes to get from one church to the other, I have that downtime, that refresh time, regrouping time. Mm-hmm. The pastors that are out there that are serving the churches that have, a 9 o'clock service and a 10 o'clock service, and sometimes an 11 o'clock service, they have no downtime.
Right.
You're shifting, you're going right into the next, and I can't imagine the physical exhaustion that they're dealing with, because if we're being what we need to be and we're allowing God to do with us as He will, and the Holy Spirit to work through us and to speak through us, we're spent.
Yep.
We're
Absolutely.
spent. So.
Yeah. That's a good point, and because you don't want to get to that second service, or you don't want to get to that second church and not have anything left for them.
Right.
You want to be fair. And there were times where I was like, gosh, I wish sometimes we could occasionally swap up and let the other church go first for a change, because I always feel like I'm fresher at one than the other, and but God works through all of that, and I trust that the Holy Spirit moves and gives folks what they need when we're being faithful.
Definitely. I kind of laugh because Sweet Home, second go around, I rarely even stand behind the pulpit. It's like, I've been through this,
Yeah.
But it's kind of just a different delivery,
But, Sure. Well, that's awesome. Well, I'd like to switch gears just a little bit and talk about your role as the coordinator for women's ministry. And obviously, that's not a ministry that is pointed towards me. So I am not as familiar with all of the goings on of that, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on, so that we could all learn together. So can you kind of talk about what your role is as the coordinator for women's ministry, and really I would like to hear about women's ministry as it exists in the Global Methodist Church.
Okay, definitely. It's it's very different than what have been accustomed to.
Okay.
Probably one of the biggest things is, for those of you that are listening in women's ministry or pastors, you're not going to receive a program in the mail because there is none. One of the things, and I love the way that Alan Beasley uses the phrase all the time, of things happening organically. The way that I like to look at this is that we're on a bridge, and that bridge has railings.
Okay.
And our purpose is to stay within those railings so that we don't fall and get off track. Okay?
Yeah.
So my role as a conference coordinator leader is to not do the work, which for a doer bee, sometimes that's going to be a challenge for me. But my role is to help encourage and be a source of resources, listening ear to bounce ideas off of, to just kind of help guide us and find out for sure what are our churches doing in women's ministry. We're not asking you to go back out and recreate something. We're not going to, like I said, it's not going to be that you've got to do things a certain way, that it's whatever is working in your church that falls within this mission statement, which is to empower and encourage women in local churches to do transformative ministries, to embody scriptural holiness, and to experience the presence of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Whatever that is.
Yeah. No, I like that visual of guardrails, because it gives local churches the autonomy to work within their context what works best, while at the same time, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but at the same time to provide some guidance and some helps so that we really don't get off track and we're not teaching things that would be counter to our doctrines and disciplines.
That is correct. That's where the railings of the bridge come in. Is that we're going to stay within the boundaries of what our doctrines and disciplines are. But I'm not going to tell you that you've got to have a meeting every month, and that you've got to have a Bible study during that meeting, and that you've got to collect, monies. And guess what? You don't have to send any money to the Global Methodist Church out of your women's ministry fund. That's yours to do what you want to with, because our goal, men and women, all of us, is to do all that we can to show love and concern for those in our community for the purpose of making disciples for Jesus. My whole phrase is, I love to say, our purpose is to make heaven crowded. That's it. So if that means that Miss Judy at Standing Rock is mailing out cards, that that's the women's ministry of the church, great. Because that is letting the people around us, know that they're loved and they're thought of. If it's one of the churches in the South District in Alex City, they make vanilla flavoring. They make homemade vanilla flavoring, which takes a year to process, but that's what they do, and they sell it to fund their women's ministry, to go out and support ministries within their community.
That's awesome.
There are churches that are in our South District that every month the women's ministry group will have some type of project. It may be cans of soup for our Christian Service Center's food bank. It may be items to donate to save a life that they can use to give to expectant mothers when they come in for their visits. It may be bringing in a guest speaker that talks to, this was a powerful one, that comes in and talks to the women about things that they need to do to be prepared for their own death. And how that impacts the family, setting up PODs on checking accounts. How do you need to make sure your insurance is set up? Do you have a contingent beneficiary? Things like that, because although we might look at that as like, okay, what is that doing to make heaven crowded? Well, we're not real sure, but what is it doing for the needs of your congregation?
Right.
Because that is something that is a struggle, and especially if you end up in scenarios where, you have widows group, or even on the men's side, widows groups, that it's, what are we going to do to help them navigate through where they are right now? So, some of the churches are doing women's conferences. Langdale Methodist Church does a women's conference every year that that is opened up to anybody that wants to attend. We just had that this weekend that I attended, and it's actually not called a conference, it's a retreat. And it's to help build up women and to bring messages that are specifically for how women think, because if y'all haven't figured it out yet, women and guys, we don't always think alike. There's just something about it. We just don't. Sure. So, those are kind of the things. And, as a women ministry in the Global Methodist Church, though, we're encouraged, that, each church has a coordinator. And I say that, and I'm going to go ahead. I have 2 small churches. We have someone that helps coordinate our missions, which is what falls under part of our women's ministry, but not necessarily a coordinator. At Standing Rock, we don't have a women's ministry coordinator. We just kind of do things together. That is perfectly fine. You don't have to have, necessarily have somebody that is designated, but, just someone that can help bring things together, where the size of your congregation has a need for that. Let me just kind of add it that way. Because that person, just kind of oversees what's going on. So when you're small, everybody oversees one another.
Sure.
Yeah. And they can, your name for your women's ministry can be whatever you want. You are not Global Methodist Women. You are a women's ministry within your church and your community, and call yourself what you want to call yourself. We want to work toward balancing out, what the needs are, whether that be in spiritual formation or leadership or even service. One of the things I was listening to your podcast with Toby, is we have a huge need for people to accept the call into the ministry.
Right.
And and from a female perspective, there are not that many of us. So there's not
Sure.
that many that are out there to build that encouragement. So to have somebody to come in that helps you navigate, if this is what God is calling you to do more than just lead a youth group or Sunday school class, He's calling you to pulpit ministry. This is what it looks like. So they can have someone come in to do that, because there's a lot of women serving in our churches today that I feel like God wants to put them out there, to be in those ministry roles. What is a hot point, highly needed ministry in a rural area may be very different from what that need is in a metropolitan area too. So, and then of course, and they got to have some accountability. It's not that you're just going to go off as a group of women and say, "Hoo, I am woman, I am strong, and this is what I'm going to do." You kind of got this person in your church, male or female, that's called your pastor. So you want to make sure that whatever you're doing, that they're on board. They know what it is. Bounce those ideas off of them, because when we do things together and attack things together, we become stronger together and are going to have a much bigger influence.
Amen. That's right. And yes, it's certainly, accountability is not limited to women's ministry. We are all accountable to each other and ultimately accountable to God. So that's exactly right. You have touched on this a couple of times, and I think it's worth exploring a little bit to talk about women in clergy roles, because you're right. We don't have that many, and we certainly need to encourage young women, or women really of any age, who are feeling a call to ministry to explore that call and to live into that. And one of the things that was really encouraging for me with our convening conference was seeing Bishop Moore elected on the first ballot, and just the leadership that she brings, the experience that she brings, but also the model that young women are able to see of women in ministry, and I think that's so important, so powerful for us. And I don't know, you were raised in the Methodist Church, and you obviously have some experience with this. Could you just kind of talk about your experience being female clergy in the Global Methodist Church, or really throughout your ministry time?
Well, let me back up. Pretty much grew up in the Baptist church.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Yeah, as I mentioned to you off air, that my family moved around an awful lot, and that I did not start attending the Methodist church until my son Marty was like 12, 13 years old. So we're talking about early 90s.
Okay.
Mid-90s. And that's that one Sunday morning. I'll just briefly share. The one Sunday morning we left to go to church, and Marty said, "I want to go to Hopewell today." And I said, "Marty, we're not going to Hopewell. We're going to go to our church. We're going to Fairview Baptist. That's where we go to church." And he said, "Well, I just don't understand why I can't go to Hopewell with my friends." And this mama, y'all listen to what this mama said. This mama said, "We can't go to Hopewell Methodist because we're Baptist." My son said, "Oh, I thought we were Christian."
Oh.
End of conversation.
Oh, from the mouth of babes.
Yeah. So this is no exaggeration. This is no lie. This is the absolute honest truth. The next Sunday, we left for church, went through all the things we do every Sunday morning, trying to get everybody ready and in the car. And I got to the stop sign where I normally turn left. I turned right. And Marty says, "I thought we were going to church." And I said, "We are." He said, "Well, Mama, you're going the wrong way. You're going to take a different route today?" And I said, "No, we're going to Hopewell today." And he just kind of looked at, I remember he turned and he looked at me like, "Really?" And he said, "Why are we going to Hopewell today?" I thought we couldn't go to Hopewell because, and I said, "Marty, we're going to go to Hopewell today because you wouldn't want to go to church and with some of your friends, so we're going to go visit today." And I said, "That's what we're doing. We're just going down to visit." I never turned left again.
Wow.
What I experienced when I walked in and was part of that church and that worship experience was something that I was missing, So that's how I ended up there. So when we look at this question that you ask about women in ministry and the challenges, is it's very challenging because Paul just had to say that about sitting down, shut up, don't dress up, don't wear makeup, don't wear jewelry. A woman's place in the church is to be quiet, that she's not supposed to be in leadership roles. We go ahead and we move on over further in the New Testament, and we're told that women ain't supposed to do that. People have a tendency to just pull that part out. And first of all, you got to understand what was going on at that time in history. And, some ruckuses being caused by some of the women. But you got to read the whole context of what was going on. And then when you really start to look at it, and you begin to realize that some of the first evangelists and people that opened their homes for ministry were women.
Absolutely. That's right.
And that is not taught. And I think that is probably the biggest stumbling block for women going into the ministry, is you never hear those stories. You never hear that in, Paul Harvey, the rest of the story. So we're not out there even planting the seed of the possibility that God is calling you to do this, or even helping people to realize that, yes, Nannette Brooks, this devotion that you're doing, that's ministry. Yes, Nannette Brooks, you're teaching a Sunday school class, that's ministry. I had never taught a Sunday school class. I had never. And Rusty Williams, who I mentioned early on, when he got his call into the ministry from Hopewell, he was our Sunday school teacher. And he called me aside one Sunday morning and he said, "Since I'm leaving, you need to teach Sunday school class." I said, "No, I don't." He said, "Yeah, you do." I said, "No, I don't." I said, "Mr. Rusty, I've never taught Sunday school." And I said, besides, I can't teach your class. You don't even have a Sunday school book. He said, I use the book. Rusty was teaching the book of Genesis, okay? Mm-hmm. Well, I am nowhere near equipped to do anything like that. So he hounded on me about it for several weeks. And one Sunday he said, you're going to teach this class. I said, Mr. Rusty, I can't. I don't even know how. I said, I don't even know where to start. He said, I'm going to tell you what you're going to do. He said, you're going to go buy your Matthew Henry commentary. I said, what is that? So he explained what that was. Now, at that time I was traveling for work. I was in the convenience industry, and I traveled about 1,500 miles a week, and I was gone 3 or 4 days a week. And I had this little bookstore when I was traveling in Georgia between Macon and Perry. There's a little bookstore in Byron, Georgia. There's a little outlet shopping center. And that's where I would usually go to walk and to stretch my legs. When I go in a bookstore, I just, I have tunnel vision and I go for the bargain books. Well, they had this big table set up with all these bargain books on it. I bet you can't guess what was on that table.
Wow.
White with red and blue writing on it was and I didn't realize how big it was. It was this Matthew Henry commentary, and I think I paid $10 for it. So I bought it, and I taught the Sunday school class. And it was a while after I had been in pulpit ministry that's like, God, I just realized you used Rusty to train me way back then for what you had planned for me now to enter the ministry when I'm 59 years old.
Wow. Yeah. Well, yeah, and you had mentioned to me, and this might be a good time to mention this, you actually had been doing ministry for like 25 years before you even realized you were doing ministry for 25 years.
Yeah. Well, my role with the local convenience store I was with, I was their marketing, advertising, public relations director. I love saying that because I loved my job. I absolutely loved my job. And part of that was to coordinate radio advertising, and we had a local radio station that we ran commercials on, and on Sunday they had a Sunday morning gospel show. So I had gone to my boss and told him, I said, don't think we need to run our fast, fresh, and friendly Spectrum ad on Sunday mornings. I said, I really feel like, if y'all are in agreement and Woody's okay with it, Woody was our owner, I think we should do like a little devotion. So they were in agreement, and I started either, finding a devotion, writing a little devotion, maybe, a minute and a half, 2 minutes. And the guy on the radio that did the gospel show, his name was Charles Story, and Charles would read those. Well, they began to get a little bit longer. And there was one particular week that Charles called me, because I would always get it to him early so he'd have time to read over it. And he said, I can't do this devotion now. And I said, what's wrong? And he said, there's nothing wrong with it. It's now become personal, and you've got to do it. And so I started doing them. And, they started off about 4 to 5 minutes. And as I shared with you, sometimes they turned into a mini sermon that was about 12 minutes. But they gave me whatever time that I needed, because it was just awesome. Local radio, and I miss local radio so much. But and I did that for 25 years, and I would have people ask me about it. And there was a short time when we were bought by Circle K that didn't happen, and then it finally just went away. And I would still have people approach me about it.
Wow.
I never thought about that as ministry until after being in ministry and pulpit ministry for a while. And I look back, and it's like, oh my goodness, that's what that was. Another thing that God had started doing to prepare me for what He had planned. Oh, and in the meantime, I didn't tell you this. My job that I had for 28 and a half years, including, we sold to the big company, and been doing it 28 and a half years. Yeah, one January the 3rd, Byron, Georgia, just right down the road from where I got my Matthew Henry commentary. I found out that I was no longer critical for business and lost my job, lost my car. I hadn't owned a car in about 30 years. You know, and thought my world was falling apart. And it wasn't until I entered pulpit ministry that I realized that God had to close that door, have me back home every day in a job that I worked Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30, to be able to be a pastor. I could have preached on Sundays and been on the road, but I couldn't have been a pastor. So God did what God needed to do to get me where He wanted me to be, to do what His plan and His purpose from my conception had been. And y'all, that is humbling.
Yes.
That's humbling.
Yes, absolutely. Wow. What a great witness to what God was doing, but also your willingness to say yes. And that, I think, sometimes in our lives, and I'm an example of this at times too, we feel God calling us to do something, or we feel that nudge and we ignore it, or we put it off, or we don't do it. But what an amazing journey life has taken you on, and God has taken you on, that's brought you to where you're doing such incredible ministry there in Chambers County and in your area. So that is awesome, and it really is powerful to be able to witness others who have similar characteristics to you doing ministry. And so there's no telling in your own life in ministry how many young women you have inspired and encouraged just by doing what you're doing. And we don't always know the impact we're having on others, but your faithful witness in answering God's call is a blessing far beyond your local churches. I am 100% convinced of that.
And
yeah,
Brandon,
go ahead.
Okay, and I just want to say, if you're listening to this podcast and you're a female and you're not real sure, but you feel like God may be calling you, reach out to me.
Yes.
Reach out to me, because I'll have the raw, hard conversation, about just being real and being who we are. And, for me, and I don't know if it happens with guys, when I stepped in that pulpit, it was like, okay, who do I need to be like? I started looking at all of these women that had seen in ministry or attending conferences with. Who do I need to be like? And y'all, if I can say one thing to every person, male, female out there, God called you to be you.
That's right.
No matter who you are, no matter what you look like, no matter what your economic standing is, male, female, God called you to be you because He knows you better than anybody else does. Yes, and when He calls you, He knows you're getting a crazy Nannette Brooks. He knows that. He knows that I'm different. He called me to be different for others. So
that's right. That's right. Yes, God took into account all of our failings and foibles before He ever called us. He's very well aware of all that we are, and that's a great word. Thank you for saying that. Well, we're about out of time, but one question that I like to ask to wrap up is this. I wonder, Nannette, if you have a favorite hymn or worship song, or if there is one that is really speaking to you in this season of life and ministry.
Well, I have one. I have several, but the first one that comes to mind is one that is my very dear friend Tim Alexander's song, and it's Goodness of God. And when Tim, I don't know those you might know Tim, been in ministry in our area for so long. 2 years ago, almost to the day, Tim was preaching at Langdale Methodist Church and had what they thought at first was a seizure live on Facebook. Led to finding out that he had a brain tumor. And through his surgeries and through his rehabilitation, when I would call him, he would sing the chorus of Goodness to God. And that became his theme song, that God was going to deliver him. Well, y'all, last Sunday, Tim brought a sermon, a message.
Oh.
He was sitting in a chair, and it's phenomenal the things that God is continuing to do with him, but it's the goodness of God.
Amen.
You know.
Amen. Wow, that song is working in so many people's lives right now. You are about the third person that I have talked to already in this young season of this podcast who has mentioned that song. It is clearly working in people's lives. That's awesome. So thank you for sharing that, and praise God for Tim and the work that God is doing in and through him. Well, friends, that is about all the time we have for today on the Heart and Life podcast. What a great conversation about life and ministry, about the importance of women's ministry and women in ministry, the challenges that we all face, and what for me is a word that I have heard over and over and over again in my own life and ministry, and it is this: every Christian is called to be a minister. Every Christian is called into service in some form or fashion. Some are, yes, going to answer the call to pastoral ministry, to pulpit ministry, but we are all called in some way. And then what an encouragement to hear so many stories today about that. Friends, let me offer this word of encouragement as we wrap up this episode. God is ready, willing, and able to perform a tremendous work of transformation in your life. And we praise God for that. But know this, the work of transformation most often happens within the context of the local church. If you're listening today and you've gotten away from the church, or maybe you just really never felt like church was your thing, let me encourage you to get connected and get involved. If you're down in the Chambers County area, check out Sweet Home or Standing Rock. And if you're somewhere else, hit up the GMC website and find a church in your area. I want to say thanks once again to the Reverend Nannette Brooks for joining us today. What a great conversation. I've been blessed by it, and I hope that you all have been as well. God bless you all. Well, that's about all the time we have today on the Heart and Life podcast. We hope you've enjoyed our conversation, but even more, we hope that something in it brought you hope, inspiration, or maybe taught you something new. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, follow, subscribe, and share our podcast on your podcast platform of choice. Music for today's episode is Genoa by 50 Sounds.